Everyone, thanks for coming. DIY Print Culture and Mobile Art, our next program. We have Anya Hogan Finley, Claire Lagomarsino. I've said it 3 times today, but that was the one time I messed it up. There's all 3 artists who have contributed to print culture in their own way. Anya Hogan Finley, right here. Anya Hogan Finley, co-founder of the Bookmobile Collective, which we'll hear about shortly. She's also co-founder of OK Sea Salt, a sea salt business based on the Lehigh Islands in Mi'kma'ki. Claire Lagomarsino is the founder of Combos Press, based in Catskill in New York. Combos focuses on queer communities, queer agriculture, queer cookbooks. Michael McCormick is an artist, curator, and educator based in Chibuktuk. He created the Suitcase Gallery and Space Research Institute in the early 2000s, wherein he would bring the gallery to you in a suitcase. You would call him up, and then he would whip it out. He'd whip out the suitcase. In conversation, they will explore DIY print culture and mobile art. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Well, this is the first time that the 3 of us have ever met in person, so this is an experiment. Thanks for joining us. So my name's Anya. My pronouns are she and her, and the way we have set this up is we're each going to speak for about 10-12 minutes, and then we have a few questions for each other, and then we'll open up the floor for questions as well. And so for slides, shall we just...
Did you guys want to try to use the mouse, or should
Oh.
we just have... I only
We can
talked to
try.
Michael about this.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Anya's
you can
going
use this
first.
wireless mouse if
Okay.
you want to click through the slides yourself.
Let us try and see if that works. Ding dong. Okay, that's
You
good.
can only go forward though.
Only forward.
Yeah. So it's
Seriously?
a challenge.
Okay, there's no back.
Yeah.
There's no back. Okay,
Yeah,
right
there's
on.
no back.
Okay.
But they're happy to.
Accommodate.
Yeah.
Yes.
It takes a little
Digital
bit of-
support.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okie doke. So we're going to get into it, and one of my co-speakers will be a timekeeper, I hope, and just tell me if things are going to. Oops. Oh, I can't go back. Oh, I could. Okay, great. All right, cool. Okay, so I'm going to be sharing an overview of Projet Mobilier Bookmobile project, which was formative to my life, my worldview, my career, my everything. And it's a project that was based in Montreal and Philadelphia, and a collectively organized mobile exhibit of zines, artist books, and independent publications. This is a quote. I reread the Bookmobile book last night, having not read it in a while. And this quote from Sonia Allers, I think, very much captures some truths about the project. So the Bookmobile was an entity unto itself. It made friends on its own. We just happened to be there. So this project very much came out of DIY culture, and was founded by a core group of about 5 of us. So myself, Courtney Daly, and Rebecca were students at Concordia University, and we came up through queer art, punk culture, lots of letterpress printing, screen printing, zine making. Layla Portovoff was my roommate, joined the team, and then Courtney and Ginger started dating. Courtney got a job in Philly, moved to Philly from Montreal, and so suddenly we became a binational project. The collective then kind of organically started to form. There was around 20 or so people. This list also includes some folks who were tour guides and involved in the project in other kinds of significant ways. Okay, so kicking off this freaky dream that we had. So a visit to the Bibliothèque Nationale in Montreal was one of the kind of reasons that inspired us to want to bring zines and artist books out of the archives, out of the library, onto the road to be able to share with people and handle and touch. And so myself and Courtney and Ginger, so it was just the 3 of us at this point, conjured this idea to get a trailer, and Courtney knew that we would, if we had an attractive space, we would attract people to come into our mobile art project. So we bought an Airstream. Courtney and Ginger both worked in the graphic design world, and they had read an article about a group called FreeCell that was a design collective based in New York, and they cold called this group FreeCell and asked them if they would pro bono design the inside of our trailer so we could house books. And so they did, and so we worked with them for probably 4 days straight in Philly and New York, building out these MDF shelves. So back in 2001, or 2000, I guess, we did our first call for submissions. So our call for submissions, we very much were reliant on mail and email. It goes without saying, this was before the time of like social media. And we also very much used the Artist Run Center. What's the name of the guide of all Artist Run Centers? The book that is the directory, anyways, that thing. Anyways, so we wrote to every single Artist Run Center in Canada. Yeah, they might be here, and apologies. RAACQ, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. So the call for submissions, there was a lot of mailing back and forth, and also we very much relied on our own kind of networks of friends across North America to get the word out. So here are some of the ephemera. Again, kind of a ramshackle mismatch of aesthetics for this project, certainly. I wouldn't say, we never had a logo that was not kind of like a through line in terms of the look of the printed matter that was associated with the project. And here is a glimpse at the inside of the trailer. So this is the finished inside of the Airstream trailers, the 1959 Airstream trailer designed and built out by Freecell. 10 years after the close of the project in 2014 and then launching in 2015 at the Los Angeles Art Book Fair, we made the Bookmobile book. And that is what we have here, and I have one in my lap. And we're selling them today at the front door for $20, and proceeds are going to the Palestine Red Crescent Society. So most of the images, almost, I would say all of the images in this talk are from the book, and many of them were photographed by Leo Trudel. And a good portion of the books that toured in the Bookmobile are at Artext in Montreal, which is a publicly accessible artist-run center. And so many of the books also that we're seeing here in these next two slides were selected by John Davies, who's a writer and curator and critic, and John selected these works to include in the Bookmobile book. And I'm going to read from John's essay very briefly to describe the kinds of books that were in the Bookmobile book, or rather in the Bookmobile. Okay, so authors included prisoners, kids, art students, poop and plug wiring diagram enthusiasts, librarians, Jewish women, animal liberationists, seniors, drummers, exhibitionists, Catholic workers, Arab Canadians, Mexican immigrants, Asian American punks, queers of color, dorks, trans women, fishermen, the homeless, psychiatric survivors, people with AIDS or endometriosis, professional artists, Grey Gardens fans, women who had had abortions. These publications include punk, hardcore, and hip-hop fanzines, poetry chapbooks and conceptual writing, comics and drawings, photography, printmaking and collage, performance, documentation, gossip and satire, diaries and lists, porn and manifestos, first-person accounts of demonstrations and political action, zines for kids on political issues, documents of street art and urban interventions, conspiracy theories, games, and choose-your-own-adventure books. So John, I think, did such an excellent job capturing the range of books that were in the Bookmobile. Let me go forward. Uh-oh. There we are. Okay. And so these are a few more. So I'm going to cruise through these next slides and talk a little bit about how we organize ourselves. So we were all volunteers, and so photo on the right is the kind of, what are we, 4 core collective members. One of the collective members, Rebecca, moved to Vancouver, so again, our network kind of stretched across the country. In this photo, we see Isabel Santamon, and Isabel joined the collective around 2002, 2003, and was instrumental in authentically making the project bilingual. We had named the project Projet Mobilier Bookmobile Project with the intention of being a bilingual project, but we weren't, I think, authentically that until she came along and was really instrumental in tour booking and making sure that we were going to rural places in Quebec. So skill sharing, fundraising, and touring. A huge part of this project was, I think, influenced by DIY punk culture and the culture of skill sharing. So when we were on tour, we would always do a zine making workshop or bookbinding or collage or media literacy workshop, or also an artist talk like this. So prior to this project, in the era that I was in doing my undergraduate, if there were available courses to learn how to write a Canada Council grant or give an artist talk, I never took those courses. I don't think they existed. So we really figured a lot of this stuff out while we were on the road and just kind of figuring it out kind of as we went along. And so I think we all kind of had an instinct to different things. So some folks had an idea about how to book a tour because they were in a band, or they had traveled with a band, or somebody knew how to write a grant, or knew where to get support to figure that out. And so with our workshops, we would have instructions. You can see some of those here. And I want to pause here for a moment to talk, and hopefully in our questions later, we'll talk a little bit more about accessibility. So an idea that we had about our project was to make artist books accessible to wide audiences. And the conversations we were having then about accessibility are very different than the ones we're having now. A physical barrier limitation with our 1959 Airstream trailer was the width of the doorway. It wasn't an accessible venue for entering if you have limited mobility or in a power chair. And so oftentimes we would bring out a selection of books outside of the trailer. It's not at all the same experience. And workshops would be held sometimes in a gymnasium or outside. But even here, the participant in the power chair doesn't have optimal conditions to be participating in this workshop. So fundraising. Fundraising for the Bookmobile, we did eventually get grants and wrote artist grants, but we also made merch, t-shirts, buttons, patches, this kind of thing. And every year we would make a screen printed poster. And so the screen printed poster, I think we sold for, I want to say $10. I hope it wasn't $5, but it might have been just $5. But it was also an opportunity for us to reach out to artists who we admired or had crushes on. So the first poster was made by Julie Doucette. Sign our guest book. We would keep track of folks who came in, their email addresses. So we kind of built our community by having this, there was no Instagram at the time, and so we would follow people, and people would follow us, and then would pay attention to our call for submissions, and sometimes maybe make a zine in a workshop and then submit it the next year. And I'll mention, so none of the books were for sale in the Bookmobile. They were all to be enjoyed on tour and also not on loan. So it really was kind of from the spirit of anti-capitalist punk rock movements. Space 1026 in Philadelphia is an artist-run space where a lot of our posters were printed. So we're going to cruise through some more of these posters that were printed. And then, crowdfunding. So when we were making the Bookmobile book, and it took us years to make it, took such a long time, we ended up needing to get more money, and so we did a huge campaign. Thank you if you gave money to it. Thank you, thank you. But so this was also a new kind of platform, whereas before we did a lot of art auctions, so we did these in Montreal and in Philadelphia. Here are some posters from those, as well as posters that some of the host venues would have been putting up to, the formatting's all wonky, touring. Anywho, so touring. This is a picture of some tour guides in Quebec sleeping in the back of the van. And this also gives you a sense of the scale of our rig. So it's about 52 feet long. Some people who were tour guides didn't have a driver's license, and that was okay if you could give like a bookbinding workshop. So again, it was really about kind of like looking at the skills in the collection of folks who were involved in the project. Okie doke. And so when we were putting this book together, the Bookmobile book, we reached out to folks who had been involved with the project and invited them to offer up comics and memories from the project. And so these are a few of those. And I'm going to pause here for a moment on one from Hannah Jickling. So Hannah, who had, I think, done a couple of years at NASCAD, was a tour guide and was a dear friend of Helen Hill. And so Hannah was on tour and had intended to go to New Orleans. Hurricane Katrina happened, and then ended up meeting up with Helen and Francis and baby Francis Pop and Paul in Columbia, South Carolina. And so Hannah created a very moving memory of her last time seeing Helen, who has passed. And so now we're looking at an inverted view of North America and the routes that the Bookmobile took over those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years touring. And then this is a map that Ginger Brooks Takahashi, again, one of the co-founders, created for the book, which I have in my lap, which I'll hold up later. And this is what is called the diagram of influences, untitled diagram of influences. And so this is something that is interesting because it really kind of, it also captures a moment in 2000, but then also in 2014 when Ginger was making this, and we all kind of brainstormed on what might go in this. And I'm getting close to time. So this map is included in an exhibition that's actually going to be that's been at the Brooklyn Museum, and it's moving to the Vancouver Art Gallery. That is called Copy Machine Manifestos, Artists Who Make Zines. So Ginger's work is here, which is so groovy, and it has a mention of the Bookmobile in it. It also has LTTR, which is a zine that Ginger collaborated on with some other artists. Another project that came around the same time, around 2004, is Pilot TV, and this was a publication that toured in the Bookmobile. And Pilot TV is also featured in the Disobedience Archive at the Venice Biennale and is going to be launching next week. So I wanted to include that here also. And then the Bookmobile retired, and so now it is in a rural place, and it is part of the Black Fly Collective, and it doesn't look like this. I think they have a chimney and a wood stove in it, but they're using it as a kind of a headquarters, and we can talk more. Folks can look up the Black Fly Collective. And then 2 more slides to wrap things up. So Petite Queer Pride is an event that I co-organize with friends on the South Shore, and so I feel that the queers and the ethos and the DIY kind of artists and activists that worked on the Bookmobile project with me and that I met through that project influenced and continue to influence all of the things that I do in life, including this very fun rural queer project. You can follow the Instagram account, has very, very funny memes, and we're going to be hosting our 3rd annual Petite Queer Pride on July 6th at the Broad Cove Hall, note to self. And then making sea salt. So myself and Kim Kelly co-founded OK Sea Salt. Also, super fun DIY project where we have the courage to learn things and figure things out as we go along, making mistakes, and being the freaks who we are. And so that is the end of my presentation.
No. Okay, does this work? Okay, great. Thank you. I'm Claire. This is my first time in Halifax. I'm from the States, New York to be specific. And I am just going to chat about how I went from a college student to publishing my first book, self-publishing my first book, to tabling at the famous and iconic Halifax Art Book Fair. Ooh.
Claire, if it's easier, I mean, the setup is janky, but you can hold the mouse in the air and it won't, like, fly around.
There we go. Okay.
Use the scroll wheel, yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Use the scroll wheel.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Back to the
Thank you. So I started my book design and loving journey at Parsons School of Design in New York City, where I went to undergrad. I took so many book making, book arts, graphic design classes in college, and really fell in love with the craft of designing and making books. This is a slide of my early work, which I am now a little bit embarrassed by, but this was happening in 2015, 16, and while I'm having this magical, miraculous book design loving experience, I'm also sort of becoming a little disillusioned by my university experience and designing in that context. Sort of funnily, I took a zine class, and that was deeply influential to me. I became very obsessed with the cut and paste punk aesthetic. I think I would have been really inspired by Anya's work had I been growing up in the early 2000s when it was touring. So the whole Riot Girl movement, Sniff and Glue, Dishwasher Pete, Fact Sheet 5, if you're familiar with punk zine culture at all, like these were huge inspirations to me. This image is from the NYU Fails Library that has a lot of these old zines in their archives. And also at the same time, I go to my first book fair. That photo is of me at the New York Art Book Fair in 2015. It does not look like this anymore. It is a mob scene. I'm enjoying a very calm moment, learning what self-publishing is. And all of these things combined are really sort of turning gears in my head. I graduate from college and immediately enter the corporate workforce. I start working for a very traditional publishing company called W.W. Norton. And I'm obviously the lowest rung on the ladder there. So I'm watching people make contracts. I'm managing the slush inbox, which is basically where authors who don't have agents send their manuscripts and cross their fingers that we're going to publish them. And so I spent basically all day rejecting people who had really amazing ideas for books, but didn't fit the traditional mold of what a big publisher was going to publish. Fast forward, the pandemic happens. I lose my job. I'm freelancing as a graphic designer. Really don't have much to do with books anymore. I've left my old life in traditional publishing, and I come across this post on Instagram that a friend of a friend posted. And it's a Black, Indigenous, queer person calling for fundraisers to help fund their farm. Basically what they did is they bought 40 acres of land, and they pitched a tent, and they were living on this acreage and looking to start a farm and needed financial help. And I had sort of kicked around the idea of my first book, Queer Earth Food, for a few years. It was going to be my thesis in college, but my professor actually persuaded me otherwise. And this was the major kick that I needed to start this project. And I started reaching out. And my idea was to fund the production of this book myself. I would edit it and design it myself and redistribute the profits to Stephanie, whose farm I was going to help fund. This is a screenshot of an email I sent to an artist that I had never met before, begging her to participate in this book. And I basically cold reached out to about 20 people, and some of them said yes, which really had me on the hook to make this book a real thing, because now a bunch of people were holding me accountable for it. One of those people was none other than Anya. Kim is hiding back there, but I found OK Sea Salt on Instagram through a friend. I reached out and asked them if they would be down to do a Zoom interview. Again, this is during the pandemic. At that time, I was living in Portland, Oregon, many time zones away. So we had a little interview, and it was great. This is Anya proudly showing off their Milwaukee pump that they use to collect salt water to make sea salt, which I learned all about in this interview. I was hell-bent on producing it myself. I had a background in design and had produced books before, so I went to a paper warehouse and bought a printer off of Facebook Marketplace for $40 and did all these test prints and made notes. I decided on coil binding because I love when books can lay flat. And so I was looking at all these plastic coils, trying to produce mock-ups of this book after I had designed it with the interviews and essays and content that the contributors had given me, and realized it would actually be way cheaper to just outsource it. So that is what I did. There's a video here. I wonder if it will play. There's no sound, but it is a video. Okay, this is a time lapse of me binding 300 books by hand. I had it printed at a local printer in Oregon and went to this community-run art space called Outlet, where I coil bound with a coil binding machine a ton of books by hand. I do not do this anymore, but I did back then. We can skip to the next one. Okay, sorry for this rapid GIF. This is my book, Queer Earth Food. I, with my own money, printed 100 copies. This is the table of contents. These are all the people that agreed to participate. This is Anya and Kim's interview. I reached out to this person from TikTok, and she wrote me an 8-page essay for this book. I also visited the Lesbian Her Story archives and scanned a bunch of stuff, and so there's some archival material in here, some more essays from farmers. I put them up on this very sort of primitive website that I created. And the first night I sold 8 copies. And I was freaking out because I thought that I was going to have to carry 90 copies of this book around with me wherever I lived. I was devastated. I was embarrassed because I was supposed to be sending Stephanie at the farm hundreds and hundreds of dollars from this book. And somehow over the course of a few days, it got picked up and people started buying it. And I started freaking out because then I had to buy more envelopes to ship them in. And so this is a photo of one of the first big batches of about 35 orders that I took to the post office. And on the other screenshot is all of the money that I was able to send Stephanie. I'm on about the 4th printing of this book. I've sold over 1,000 copies, and I've sent also thousands of dollars to Stephanie. I still do. I still print this book. The money still goes to them. And it's been a crazy whirlwind of a journey. And then I started tabling at book fairs as well. This photo right here on the left is me at my very, very first book fair 2 years ago in Northampton, Massachusetts. Which is a very small town if you're not familiar with Massachusetts. But luckily there's a primarily women's or historically women's college there, which boded very well for the queer aspect of this book. And on the right is a photo of me at my first Boston Art Book Fair, a fair that I've done a few times now. And yeah, fairs are just a really great way for me to connect with people who may think that this book is interesting. I've met contributors at book fairs. I'm publishing a memoir with someone that I met at a book fair. It's incredible and a great way for me to get out into the community that I hope is the target audience for this book. So that's the story of how I went from a college student to a world famous publisher. Thank you.
Thanks. Awesome. Thanks, Anya. That was great. Thanks, Claire. Oh, okay. So, yeah, I decided. I was working with the. Yeah, Anya kindly invited me to participate in this, and I was thinking about what I could talk about. How do I sum up the McLeave Gallery, which is a suitcase gallery that I've worked with many artists over the years, and there's one artist that really stood out as that wove through many aspects of this, and maybe captured maybe the essence of what we're doing today at the book fair, and that's Joe Cook, who I'll talk a little bit more about later. So I'll talk a little bit about the McLeave Gallery and the SAG 3 project, and then some of the projects that Joe worked with. Joe's no longer with us, passed away in 2021, but influenced a huge amount of artists and is really the essence of collaboration. If I think of any artist, one of the first artists that comes to me is almost a serial collaborator, and has opened up space for so many artists. So starting with, I'm already at 10 minutes. Wow. Okay. Let's get going. The McLeave Gallery of Fine Art. Those that know me know me well, that know that I can ramble. So it started in 2002. It was a suitcase that was found on the side of the road in Halifax by my brother. And I decided to start showing my friends artwork in it and to kind of put out a call for submissions for artists, and it was a by chance or appointment kind of basis, so people could call the gallery, and it was kind of before cell phones. I didn't have a cell phone at the time, so we relied on posters and word of mouth, and just people hailing me on the side of the road saying, "Hey, come over here," and they see the logo, I guess, so there's a little bit of like a tongue-in-cheek corporate kind of flair to it, but also an homage to the accidental donor of the space, Blanche McLeave, who when we found the suitcase, it had red Dymo tape on the top that said McLeave, so just named it after this, being a venue that was based off of accidental audience and kind of running into people. and very much the spirit of kind of casual encounters. We named it after this accidental donor that we didn't know, but we appreciated this kind of how it all kind of came together. So it was a by chance or appointment kind of basis. We worked with many artists over the years. We had a board of directors, and kind of I treated it a lot like a gallery, although I was kind of the custodian and curator and everything that kind of kept it running. So here I am, like with the gallery on a park bench, just kind of casually waiting for people to come by. Not everybody was open to. I didn't force anybody to see it, but it was. But yeah, it was. So there was some awkward moments, but yeah. But it was a lot of fun, and it was a great way to. It was sort of in my undergrad at the time, and worked with people sometimes would make appointments with me, and I would come to their house and show them the suitcase, and it was a great way to kind of break down barriers kind of between institutions and institutional structures and kind of stigma around visiting galleries that not everybody was comfortable doing. There were many other mobile galleries in the area. There's the Wallet Gallery. This is one that folks from here might remember. Courtney Parks had a Wallet Gallery. He would put pictures of himself around Halifax on posters, and if you saw him, he would show you. He would and asked him. He would show you his wallet. So there's some various shows. Chris Lloyd's letters to Jean Chrétien. He would write letters to Jean Chrétien every day for. I think he might still be writing letters to the. I know that. Yeah, the government probably has a file on him, but. He's it's many different kind of like iterations of it kind of would so not only the McLeave Gallery was happening, there were other galleries sort of many other places, people doing these sort of pop-up mobile gallery spaces throughout the world, really. The cross Canada suitcase tour kind of came next, where we collected my partner Adair Rounthwaite and I at the time were decided to kind of bring the suitcase across Canada to different locations and accumulate suitcases as we went across. So starting in Halifax, and we ended up kind of going across over the span of 2 months and ended up in Dawson City, Yukon. So there's sort of a story, like a long story there. I don't really want to get too far into it because there's quite a bit of ground to cover, but I took the suitcase on the left here is a image of the suitcase in Ireland where we took it, or no, sorry, I can't remember. Yeah, this is Edinburgh. Sorry, yeah, thank you. So we had this sort of lineage tour where we invited artists to respond to the theme of lineage and brought the suitcase to the UK, but also to Ireland. To find the kind of donor of the space who we hadn't met yet. And then we did this Suitcase Art Gallery Space Research Institute, which was a fictional space research institute that was where we would, there's sort of a retirement mission of the gallery to really, I had been, this is 27, 28, so I had been sort of lugging the suitcase around for 5 years, and I was getting a little tired. I was only in my 20s. I didn't know how tired I'd be 20 years later, but the suitcase, the idea was we were going to launch it into orbit and have a big celebratory goodbye to the gallery, but also work with artists to under this kind of space theme and how are we going to distribute artwork in a DIY manner and in sort of a grassroots manner through this like fictitious space research institute. So that's the Canada arm on the McLeave Gallery as it exits the other suitcase and goes into orbit. This is we designed a flag for each planet in the solar system, so the suitcase could fly a flag as it went kind kind of there's the satellite there on the left, sort of a McLeave one, and it would sort of go around each planet and fly each flag as it went, but also kind of drop these multiples, which were each artist would kind of have a mini version of an exhibition that also expanded into like an actual exhibition that we showed in various places, such as the Khyber and some other places around. But people would ask for parts of it, and we would sort of do that. But anyway, moving on to Joe Cook. Moved to Main Island, BC, from Vancouver in the 90s. And really inspired a lot of artists. So this is Joe and I sitting in front of the Emily Davidson's wallpaper project, Agitate, Educate, Organize, in 2012, which links history of female working and female artists. So that was part of the Mayworks Festival, but Emily allowed me to bring it to the Yukon for the Dawson City Print and Publishing Symposium, which Joe and I were taking part of in 2013. She was an amazing kind of friend and collaborator. These are two books that we worked on together. The one on the left here. I'll get into Paraverlag in a second, but this is Ag Zorn, Dragons of the Air. So this was sort of documents from a recovered notebook from the paleontologist Maud Johnson and her lover Francis Zorn, who was a poet. So Joe made these amazing fiction, science fiction kind of stories that were published through her Paraverlag press in Main Island, BC. On the right is a project that we did together in the McLeave Gallery. This was in the suitcase, the data distribution probe, that multiple that I just showed you. There was part of that group show there that it was Francis Zorn is pseudonym, and Ag Zorn are both pseudonyms of or characters and pseudonyms of Joe. So this is another book, The Last Four Cows of North America, that Joe did for the Lineage Tour, sort of mixing fiction with historical documents, documenting her roundabout journey through genealogy, and also mixing fact and fiction. So this influence that she had just on, like we were having conversations about this while thinking of the Suitcase Gallery and some other things, but she did this Documents of Psychic Amateurs, where she invited artists from all over the place to kind of put together this periodical of a fictitious kind of institute as well, like a the people would kind of be faculty or research assistants and students that would put together this kind of compilation of works that were part of this institute. And Joe Cook's Voyages on Serd was another really impactful book that she did during the Eye Level Reshelving Initiative. Later on, I worked at Eye Level Gallery, and Joe was an artist in residence in 2009 and was made this during the residency. So the thing about this was a residency that Eye Level and the Dawson Print Shop at NSCAD University did. If anybody's familiar with the Dawson Print Shop, it's just tons of typeface, a huge amount of upkeep through. Sorry, I'm kind of going over a little bit here. Okay. And an amazing amount of sort of labor to maintain this collection. Joe Landry has been involved with the Dawson Print Shop and the Letterpress Gang over years. Emily Davidson, Vincent Perez at the time worked with Joe at during the residency, but at the time Dawson Print Shop was sort of its own kind of commercial venture, and NSCAD sadly closed it before the end of an entire year, about 9 months. Yeah, but it's still going. Okay. Yeah, so yeah. There's a story. Did you want to? No. Okay. No, yeah. No, I was kind of okay. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so it was at the time in 2009. It was sort of it was said to be closed, but it had continued on as Letterpress Gang and some other, and it's kind of continuing on in different forms. But the great thing about what I'm trying to get at here, actually, sorry, Rebecca, what I'm trying to get at here is the amount of spin-off that came from that experience. Joe was there for 6 weeks max. Stayed with beloved artist Jim McSwain, who's here today, and met Jim McSwain during that residency. And then every year, so Vincent went on to start Ever Lovin' Press in Kingston, Ontario, and Joe and Jim would go on to collaborate every year for about 10 years, every summer, and Jim would visit Joe's studio in Main Island and create these beautiful bookworks with Paraverlag books by artists. So this is Eruption, the first book that they did together that kind of came out of the residency. And Jim went on to kind of do many titles with many kind of sort of collaborations with Joe over the years. So this is the Dawson Daily News in Dawson City, an old print press, and ironically called Dawson, but the sort of connection, what I found really interesting was the contrast between this was a facility in Dawson City in an old newspaper house that was only accessible for like a few days a year during this symposium, and the rest of the time this collection was meticulously kept because it was under the umbrella of Parks Canada, whereas back in Halifax, the Dawson Print Shop, there's just a lot of it's a very different style of of maintaining it. The Dawson Print Shop is very much active and full of people using it and utilizing it, whereas this is in this perfectly preserved kind of capsule. So once a year they would open it up. Joe was able to. This is Joe on the left working with a rubbing workshop, and Ray Fenwick on the right, another artist that Joe has had a huge influence on. They worked on this press. Babel Press is like a sort of a game of telephone with titles of new titles after new titles as it slowly kind of changed. So this is the sort of faux front of the Dawson Daily News building, which was sort of indicative of a lot of Western style sort of symbols of colonial power and in the West and that kind of ballooning of faking it till you make it. There's an artist, Rhys Terrace, that did a project at Western Front called the Western Front during the Olympic Games in 2010 that kind of exaggerated this, kind of bringing to mind the imbalances of the neighborhood that kind of led to. Citadel Hill would be an example of kind of our version of that, stuck to a Victorian era. Inflated tanks, which we are seeing all over the media now with wars throughout the sort of these fake faux front. The World Trade and Convention Center in Halifax, different versions of it. Sagsfree even itself kind of admittedly kind of had a similar kind of thing. I'll just wrap this up quickly. This sort of led Michael Eddy and I in 2012 to work on this project, the World Portable Gallery Convention in 2012, where we kind of would respond to this convention center sort of through operating Eye Level Gallery as sort of a taxi stand of different portable galleries. So we invited Julie Freya Sibayan to do the DIY Momo, Museum of Mental Objects, where people would whisper. It would exist in people's memories. So it was whispered in people's ears and existed for the lifetime of whoever was the carrier. The Alopecia Gallery by Gordon Eisner, who has alopecia in his beard, so would male pattern baldness in the beard, so had different artists kind of install pieces in his beard. the Gallery Deluxe Gallery just around the corner here on Willow Street. It was in the attic of in the crawl space of Francesca Talone and Paul Hammond's attic. And this is sort of a reproduction of that in the Eye Level Gallery space, which showed Chris Foster's work, Convoy. Yep. Okay. Okay, I think I'll stop it there then, because and we can kind of get into some questions. But that's pretty much it. Thanks so much, and yeah, we can go on to questions.
Hello. Well, friends, why don't we collectively decide? So we've prepared some questions for each other, but also we can just open it up to the room. Is that more fun? Questions for the room? People having questions? No pressure? Open it up, yeah. Okay. Because we have all the answers, so.
For Anya, I was wondering if there was ever like chaos with the bookmobile in terms of like drug use, or if it was like your designated like dry space, or it seemed like things ran pretty smoothly, at least through the way it was presented in this PowerPoint. And I was wondering like, did it go off the rails, or like how did you control like the social part of it, or is there any particular story like that when that happened?
Yes. Things can look really good and clean in a slideshow. It's interesting you mentioned. So not drug use, that wasn't an issue. Just interpersonal dynamics, as I mentioned, the collective really did grow organically through friendships, and then friendships evolved and dissolved. And so the structure that we kind of operated under is we would have an annual retreat, and sometimes those retreats were an absolute like mess. There'd be fighting and crying and Marxist name calling, and just like it was really messy. And people would leave the collective as well, right? So people didn't want to go on tour with each other. Or like there was also issues where a corporate sponsor had offered to give us a whole bunch of money, and half the group wanted to go for it, and the other half didn't. So definitely like folks taking different positions, and then either remaining or disengaging from the project. So things were certainly messy. At one point, Michelle T., who's an author, wanted to come on tour with us and like write a book about us, but we met her at a punk show, and she was like, so like, who's sleeping with who and what's going on? Like, what's the gossip? And all of us were so tense, and we were like, we're not going to tell you that right now. And she didn't want to write the story unless she could get some really juicy info from us. But this project, I mean, after doing this project, a lot of us, we kind of learned how to like engage with institutions, because we worked with youth drop-in centers and festivals and galleries and artisan centers and schools. And so there's a lot of admin, super heavy admin, and we did all kind of learn how to do that, and some of us carried on in our career paths doing that, and some of us burnt out. But we always kind of, we were addressing many varied publics all the time, and our workshops were free. So we kind of did have to maintain like the face of the project in a way that sometimes was hard to do, for sure, if like things were actually a little bit funky happening in the background, for sure. Yeah, that's the real. Yeah. More questions?
Yeah. I've Blanche McLeave. Her nephew reached out to me. She was in her 90s at the time, and I visited her. Not in Ireland, but finally back in Halifax. She had an apartment just across from, the public gardens, and we had a really nice conversation. She had the matching suitcase. You know how the old retro suitcases would have like a smaller leather suitcase inside. So she had the matching one inside, and it was full of her family's photos that she had, and she had it under her bed. It was nearby so that she could so it was this kind of wonderful kind of full circle that came by, and we were able to meet her. Right. Yeah, that was a coincidence. It was, but it worked out. And I think Lucas Pierce actually mentioned that he was somehow related to the McLeaves. He thinks that maybe there's a connection there. So we can accredit his family, I guess, maybe a little bit too.
There was a hand over here, I think.
I have a question about the farm. I wondered, like, how's it going? I'm sorry, it's not a pretty question. I just want to know, like, how's it going? What's it growing? Did they get any grant money? Did they succeed in really, making a go of it? Like,
Yes, they are still fundraising. 40 acres is a lot, and they have very ambitious goals. They did build a house, and they do have running water now, and they do have a place to like cook and eat and be comfortable. It's Stephanie and their partner Max run this farm, and it's actually going to be an herb farm. And Stephanie makes medicinal tinctures for chronically ill people, and has a monthly like mail subscription service where they send these herbal healing products to people in their community. So that's currently going on, but I know that they would like to scale their operation. The farm is called Moonpence. It's in rural New Mexico in the southwest United States. So they're chugging along, and I continue to send them money, and other amazing people fundraise for them as well, but they're getting there.
and are they on social media then?
Yes, Moonpence Farm, I believe, and then the herb operation has another Instagram, but I don't remember the handle. Serenus Herbs, SERENUS Herbs. You can find them there. Yeah.
More questions? Yes, indeed.
How does like not having a physical like landing place, how did that like give strength to your project? Or you don't all have to answer, but if anyone wants to, like that seems very chaotic, but also super inspiring. But like, what a, yeah.
I could say something quickly to try to be quick. The flexibility, there's a versatility to kind of not having bureaucratic structures. One of the things, I work in a public art gallery now, and there's a lot of red tape and a lot of like things to, a lot of kind of, to do anything you have to have everybody on board and have a whole team together, where there's a certain flexibility and freedom to be able to just kind of do something quickly, and nimbleness to being small and to having less kind of hoops to jump through to get things done. So that was one thing that was sort of I found a liberating and a strength through that experience. Did you find that as well, or?
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking, so with the Bookmobile project, we had we rented a space in Philadelphia, kind of like a studio art space, and in Montreal, and it had like a very active time and then like a quieter time. So we did kind of feel like we had these anchors, but there were so many people involved, even in like planning, like hosting and tour booking and all of that. Everything kind of like spilled into all of our apartments as well. And I mean, I still have some Bookmobile things. However, I think it was in maybe 2006, the majority of the Bookmobile collection, no, it must have been after that in any case, and Ephemera, all then migrated to Artext in Montreal, and that was a huge relief because then it became, it's now kind of hermetically sealed, and it's in the institution, which is what we were kind of pushing against it with the whole kind of impetus of the project. But the material, like there was hundreds of books because touring each year with the juries would choose about 400 books, so they were accumulating in Tupperware bins, and we all were just like renting apartments in Montreal and wherever. And so, it was also, the project became such a huge part of our identities that it was also kind of hard to, we didn't have, it was almost like it took over our lives for a while in good and interesting ways. But I think it was a relief to physically kind of like offload all of the stuff to Artext, which was cool. And then just all of our kind of social connections, many of them continued on. But yeah, the mobile. Oh yeah, so the mobile aspect of the trailer, we had. If things had been different, we would have probably wanted to keep the trailer, but we had no way to figure out how to do that. Nobody had, land or a parking spot or space at the time to be able to kind of keep it. And so then we decided to sell it to the collective in Ontario. Yeah. So yeah, no regrets.
Do you have a question?
Just in the last end of your few slides there, Michael, there was like a few photos of food that were included, and food it seems to be a through line of the conversation here, and I wanted to see how that follows through with your component into this.
Okay, yeah, sure. That was Kate Rich's project called Feral Trade Cafe. So it consisted of food or item. We set up a cafe in the area, in the eye level gallery in the front area, consisting of only items that people brought through airplane travel. So Eleanor King had brought something that, and it's through handing it off through person to person. So it's all these feral kind of products that ended up only ingredients from sort of like leftovers that became part of the menu. So that's what that project was. It was kind of in bringing food into. Michael Eddy actually works with food a lot in his project. He was the co-curator of that project, and food is an important part of his practice, and so that was kind of a thread. Yeah. You're welcome.
Perhaps we should end there. Is that good to move to the next? But thanks for bringing up the food, because when this kind of came together, we bounced around a bunch of ideas and the through lines, and there it is. There's the sandwich. Was there one final question?
I think
Jamie at the back. Oh, great question. Okay, so thanks, Jamie. So this is the Bookmobile book, and it is for sale at the front of the building with the fantastic folks who are at the table, maybe volunteering. And you can either pay for it by sending an e-transfer to me, or I think to the Halifax, our book fair, and then sort out the finances later. And then, as I mentioned, the proceeds will be going to the Palestine Red Crescent Society. Yeah. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you all. Thank you, folks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Anna, Michael, and Claire for such a great presentation and showing the possibilities of printed matter and where it can bring you and on your journey. We're going to start Mike Alexier's talk in about 10 minutes if you want to come back to the programming room. Yeah. Thank you.